Hello, everybody. I'm Alexis. I'm the founder and organizer of various AI communities in the Bay Area, namely AI by the Bay Conference, longest running independent conference going for over 10 years. Bay Area Meetup, the oldest, deepest technical meetup on AI, physically meeting in Bay Area, and new AI Agent SF Meetup, which will celebrate its anniversary in February, one of the fastest growing Agentic AI meetups. And with me, I have Adam Pingel, who is the head of AI tools and applications at the AI Alliance. He's an engineer at IBM, my long-term buddy and speaker at a lot of our events, going back with distributed systems, functional programming, and a lot of really interesting technology. And here today, he will tell us about Semiont, which is a new project, an open source AI project hosted by the AI Alliance, which Adam created and leads. And that provides a new way to organize information in what a lot of people call semantic layer or knowledge layer. I think the year starts with several posts by prominent VCs and engineers talking about the need for this knowledge layer to make AI kind of more precise and efficient answer questions. So Adam, tell us what Semiont is, how you got to build it, what you have in mind, where it is right now. Give us the whole spiel.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Alexi. Thanks for the introduction. Let's see. I will do a demo in a few minutes. I think it'd be good to kind of walk through some of that early, but let me set that up a little bit. I've been, and I'll leave this somewhat undefined. We'll work back into what GraphRag is as we talk, but I've been talking about GraphRag, kind of advocating for it since, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and kept bumping into the problem of where does the graph come from. We could talk about GraphRag relative to RAG. We could look at the graphs. We could talk about graph traversals and come up with metrics. But I think there was often a disconnect some of the automated tools, the quality, certainly a year ago wasn't there. So there were quality concerns. How would you put a human in the loop? That was another kind of open question. So in the middle of the year last year, 2025, it occurred to me after actually doing some personal projects, just doing personal kind of family history stuff with some primary material that had wound up in my house that I wanted to build a wiki out of that, and I had written a book with that. I wanted to build a wiki, and I realized that the wiki was actually kind of a perfect place to embody the graph that I was trying to build and explain where it came from. So I kind of brought those two things together in July. This thread about GraphRag and the usefulness of graphs in enterprise AI applications and a lot of other categories of AI applications. As well as kind of more of the user-facing application that people are really familiar with of a wiki. I think these days, when we say wiki, most people just immediately think of Wikipedia, and that's obviously the biggest example. I think it's kind of gotten lost a little bit that wiki is this general category of application. And several months ago, kind of just decided how do you even define what it is? And I think a wiki is pretty simply defined as a website whose users are invited to edit the content and the structure. And so what makes that AI now, thinking kind of 2025, 2026 version, is the user could be an AI agent. So all of the things that you could imagine, if you've ever made an edit to a wiki before, you could just ask a human peer or an AI agent peer to do that. And we'll walk through it as we go, the 4 AI native features that define the claim that Semiont makes of being AI native. But fundamentally, it's going to look a lot like a wiki. It's going to look and feel like a wiki. And I'll dive a little bit into the architecture and show that there is indeed a graph underneath that. But yeah, if there's any kind of questions I should clarify before I show a few screens.
I think it's actually it sounds exciting because most people know what Wikipedia is, right? So I think Wikipedia
Yeah.
really popularized the notion of the wiki, but wiki doesn't have to be Wikipedia. It's a general kind of graph representing concepts with hyperlinks effectively leading to different other concepts defined in the wiki, right? So I think most people are very familiar with this format, and like that's what Wikipedia is. So I think so far so good.
Yep. Yeah, GitHub supports wikis still. I've used those a little bit in the last year or two, and often intranets. I don't know how much this happens this day and age, but for a while there, they were almost synonymous. Not everyone was given edit rights to all the pages, but that was a great way to publish internal content. So yeah,
Confluence is big, right? Like things like Confluence are big, and so I think wiki-like knowledge management systems are pretty good and thriving behind the intranets.
All right, so let me see if I can get this screen shared. How does that look?
That's pretty good.
All right, so this is the application. I'm running this locally. There's for the architects in the audience, this is just a Envoy proxy running locally with a front end and a back end also running locally. I should mention too that this is so started in July. It's been I've made Dependabot's made a couple of commits, but other than that, I've made the other 400. So it's been a solo project as far as the commits go. There's been a lot of great input from the AI Alliance over the last 6 months, but we're not quite yet at kind of a beta release. The APIs are settling pretty well, but the back end, for instance, is running locally. I did in an earlier version run this on AWS. It's changed quite a lot since then. I am running, and I'll pop over to this in a second. I am the first graph that I'm supporting is Neo4j, so I'll pop over to an Aura instance, which has got that nice visualization. I won't spend a lot of time looking at that visualization, but I think it is something nice to look at and say concretely, okay, yeah, all of these links inside the wiki, and you can see a couple of them here. I've automatically detected the locations in Prometheus bound. Now, I kind of hesitate to use this as the first example, but it's a nice literary example that's out of copyright. So I've automatically detected all of the locations here. So those, there's another idiom that Wikipedia uses, and I think many other wikis, which is that the resolved references show in blue. They're blue links, whereas the selections of text which have not yet been resolved to an existing page, those show as red. So in the browse mode of this application, I do the same thing, but you can see kind of the blue is there to indicate, yeah, this is a lot like a hyperlink. And so those links, yeah.
This is unusual places, heaven, earth, and Scythia. This is not what typically will be in business documents. So
for sure.
What entity recognition are you using that actually marks them as locations?
Yeah, I'll pop over to one that's a little bit more plausible in a business setting. So I have not done a lot of optimization to that. I think if anything, I'm probably bringing too much power. I happen to be running a Claude model to do this detection, and it's been.
It's awesome. I like it because if it can detect conceptual places like heaven, earth, and historical places like Scythia, that's, to me, it's really going beyond the normal expected, like New Jersey, right, and so forth.
Yep. And let me, as you know, that's a good excuse. I wanted most of the examples to be canned, but I'll do a couple live here so you can get a sense, because I think that seeing it live is really important here. So let's detect people and places in this short email, and I'll check the include descriptive references. So this is the linguist would call this there's anaphora. There's kind of the inverse of that, the cataphoric references, the things that are you state them vaguely without a concrete so a proper noun. So there are a couple of places like this. We'll see if this. As we record, this is not 100%, but this is This has been, yeah, like the owner.
Nice.
That's one that I'm going for, and the client, right? So they're
Nice.
clearly entities we care about. We might want to start writing the page for the client right now, or the
Yeah.
owner. And in fact, the whole point of this email is that we don't know who the owner is, and we should figure out who owns that property there on Oak Street in Palo Alto. But you don't want to wait until you know. I mean, that'd be circular. You can't wait until you know the person's name to get an ID to put it in the system. A lot of research happens this way. You just have a vague sense of something is out there. Start gathering what you know, and then at some point you can make the edit and give it a name.
Yes.
So while we're here, so there's this is the first of the 4 AI native capabilities. Is this detection?
Yep.
And let me just kind of pop down to here. I do not yet have image detection. This is just, there's a few domains I'm using to draw these examples from. This would be just like I mentioned earlier, I had some primary material end up in some boxes that I didn't know what I had, and so to kind of organize like old family photos. Linking documents to people, understanding how many siblings there were in a family is really an important part of figuring out what you have. So I do not yet have image detection built in, but you can see it would fit in this framework pretty well.
Yes, and people will become the entities, and like the fact of their being in the photo is a graph basically of them occurring together.
Exactly. Yep. So maybe now's a good time too to mention that. So I started out thinking of the wiki as the main kind of model, and then I thought, well, okay, having these selections work across different modalities. So Markdown is the first kind of text that I've been working with, but there's other kinds of text. There's images, different image formats. Of course, video and audio would make a lot of sense. If you get to the point where you're thinking about annotating and then different kinds of multimodal selections, the words selector and annotation together get you pretty quickly to the World Wide Web Consortium web annotation standard. So that's kind of the fundamental. If I could pop over to the Aura at this point, and let's see if that's showing up. Yeah, it's kind of small, but so this is the green nodes here represent the documents, and I preloaded a bunch before this conversation, and the yellow ones here represent the annotations. And I'd only made at that point these kind of reference annotations, the ones that are showing up in blue. The colors don't match, but you can see that it's a little bit kind of lower level or higher level, depending on how you think. This is a lexical graph. There is a semantic graph, which is part of the roadmap. Once you have the reference, so there's the document has a reference. That's one link in the graph, and the reference is resolved to the entity that it points to. So there's kind of 2 hops. There'd be a process in a future version that would kind of consolidate that down to more of a semantic level, where there'd be a direct reference between the documents. But that's I really have thought that it's and continue to think it's really important to build an application as we go that would make sense to an end user, like a business user, because we can get really abstract really quickly, and it's not clear what path to choose. So the fact that this is a lexical graph versus a semantic graph, and what's the role of an ontology, all very interesting questions, but I really want to ground that in building an actual application. Openly, and so we can all kind of check this out and see concretely, what are the choices we have, and how does that impact the user experience, and what does that look like in code?
Makes total sense, and I think this is the way most AI startups approach this, because they need to solve specific problems, and the data organization should serve that, right? Like there are problems which people want to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just, since I've got this open, so I mentioned the multimodality. We get that from the World Wide Web Consortium web annotation. And that's why I went there, and it's worked out. But then the other thing that I got that was just kind of a nice bonus along the way was they had done a lot of thinking about motivations. So the
Right.
motivation behind these blue links, that's linking. And I think of that
Mm-hmm.
as in two phases, creating the reference and then resolving it. That's the linking motivation. There are 4 others that I have baked into Semiont at this point. So there's red underlines, which I use in this case just to identify scheduling risk. So there you see the scheduling risk. Highlights, I won't necessarily do all of these live, but this would be highlight interesting facts or something like that. We've seen the blue one work. This would comment. This is the commenting motivation. You could say follow-up questions for Jennifer Walsh, the fictional person that wrote this letter. And then lastly, and I'll show an example of this. Maybe in a little bit, but this is the tagging motivation. So this is, I think, the gateway, part of the gateway to ontologies. We could tag specific spans of the text. In this case, it's been a bunch of years in legal tech. One of the kind of most common ways you might do some analysis of legal text would be to kind of see if you can make it make sense in terms of this IRAC analysis. This is how a lot of legal writing is taught. And the IRAC stands for Issue, Rule, Application, and Conclusion. So we could go to, and I'm forgetting which specific page. This is a little busy, but we can see that we've found rule applications within this Supreme Court case. That was just done automatically. It's, again, I have done no optimization or tuning regarding the models or really the prompts, but this Claude out of the box, just given the definition of what I was going for, and its prior training does a pretty reasonable job of identifying these kinds of spans. So a lot of future work to do, but those 2 things, the multimodality of the web annotations and then the motivations, come together to provide a pretty solid basis for building what's effectively, not just a wiki, but it's now you start to see it as a little bit more of an annotation tool. That's
Can you talk a little bit
obviously
about this, web annotation standard? I think most folks are not familiar with it. It's really rarely used anywhere. Like, I think this is the first application that you're building that really relies on it. And I'd like to understand, if you can give like a brief history and, why you chose this, and for instance, how does this help with open standards and interoperability, right? Like, where are these annotations stored, and how other applications, like how agents, for instance, can use them alongside the originals?
Yeah. So as far as the history goes, I believe that the date is 2017. The version of the documents that I've seen says that this was all kind of finalized in a 1.0 in 2017. I don't know too much of the why. I mean, I was in legal tech from 2015 up until about 4 years ago, and building an annotation tool was a really key piece of of doing a lot of things, including building your own machine learning models, as we would call them at the time. So I was surrounded by the need for annotations, and yet we never, as far as I can remember, maybe we bumped into it a little bit, but it just seemed, from my perspective, it just seemed like it was something that just kind of showed up, and maybe they were visionaries, but just 10 years too early or something like that. But I'm not aware of like some big uptake that happened.
So where are they stored, right? So basically, it's is it like a chunk of XML which is like marked in the original document positionally, or like does it refer to the HTML structure of the document? Can you talk a little bit about the machinery? Like, let's say you annotate the document and then somebody goes and edits the document. At which point does the annotation break?
Yeah, so they are available through, right now, just through this UI as JSON-LD, as are the resources. So maybe that's another important word. When I started writing this, I used the word document to talk about these things. And once I found the web annotation, I realized, oh yeah, this is actually deeply related to web standards and the proper word to use instead of document would be resource, and a resource has representations. So
Right.
internally, Semiont, I've been pushing it over the last few months to adopt more of that view of the world. So it feels a lot like a browser in some way too, because you're dealing with also with media types. But in terms of where are these things actually stored? So I have been, this wasn't exactly how it was born on day one, but over the last 4 or 5 months, I've been trying to make sure that we're using all append-only internal data structures, which keeps a lot of things easier than they otherwise would be. So the content itself, the representations, the JPEG and the Markdown, that's all stored in a content-addressed content store, which is right now is just something that's stored locally, but you could swap that out with any number of cloud technologies. And then the annotations, and you're looking at one right now, that's just stored in a, pardon me while I plug this back in. That's just stored in a local append-only event store. And then there's a process that rolls that up and projects that onto materialized view, which services most of the queries. Now, the graph comes into play when we do things like, so it's stored as JSON. It's a kind of one way to on a file system is one way to answer your questions. But let's see if this one might have it.
Can annotation include links to other places in the document, or is it only?
It can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been a couple of months since I got deep into the W3C standard. I've actually got an OpenAI spec that defines. It's my interpretation of what the W3 spec says. If you go to the GitHub repository, and I could pop in to that.
Oh, interesting.
In spec directory, I have.
So this is specs-based programming, which OpenAI defines as kind of semi-formal definition of natural language used to guide coding agents. So you have a whole set of specs.
This is just my, this is just OpenAPI specs in that sense. Now, let's see. Well, maybe I'll just kind of leave it at that. There's some docs. I'll pull one of these up. So here, there's a few examples of how a web annotation represented as JSON-LD work.
Nice.
So things like linking are here. If you want to see what a highlight looks like, I've got an example of that here.
Got it. I love this idea that you decouple representation, like resource decouples presentation from internal structure, right? And I think that's at the heart of a lot of the debate about building a knowledge layer, because you have the surface, brittle natural language, but you have underlying structure. So you kind of piggybacked on what W3C already did over many years, because they arrived to it through pain. That you need, right, to have resources and like HTML renderings separately. So I like this analogy, how natural language is kind of semantic layer, basically related in a similar way. So you're kind of doing it from the beginning based on what W3C built already. So that's great.
Yep. And maybe I should kind of round out the list of, and I can pull it up here too. Let me kind of orient towards the top level README. So right here, this is really important. So annotation detection, we've talked about that now a little bit. Entity resolution, most of this work is still TBD. I think what this looks like, the simplest version of this is that you search for, or like, I guess it'd be like at mentioning something. You do the @ sign, and then based on the context, it knows a little bit about what you're looking for, and it gives you a ranked list of options. That's one kind of human-driven version, but of course, there's a lot of more AI-centric ways to either do that or assist with that. And then the third thing is context retrieval. And that's where we could really talk about GraphRag and the precision that that having this layer of this graph of annotations can really bring to us. And it's not just so the virtue of having this be a graph of annotations as opposed to some abstract semantic graph is that we're always very close to some primary material. And we can traverse these annotations, many domains like legal, where I spent a bunch of years, and I think medical and many other domains. There's a lot of value to be had by moving around, I think, in a more abstract semantic space. But in a lot of industries that are very document oriented, I think straying too far from the documents is actually kind of dangerous. And so being able to do context retrieval, and tie together all of the documents and group them by time and who sent them and understand how the senders are related to one another. This can lead to a very powerful retrieval mechanism that, again, would be both AI and human driven. And then that sets up the fourth one, which is the resource generation. And I don't know if I've done one of those examples live yet, but I'll just say, I'm going to just click on this. There was a hiking notes. This is a canned example where I mentioned Tennessee Valley. This came up in a conversation I was having at home about how we used to like to hike at this place. And, maybe I did a search for it, and it's clear, like Tennessee Valley, if you have no other context, of course, you're going to get some other interpretations of what Tennessee Valley is. So this is a really, really, really simple example. But here, given the context that I state explicitly, this is located in the Marin Headlands, north of San Francisco. It knows that we're not talking about one in Tennessee or any of the others in the world.
How did you get this definition of Tennessee Valley?
I clicked on generate. Actually, let me, let me do one live here. So Marin Headlands. So we're going to say that's the location.
Yes.
Right. Right now we're going to click on the magic sparkle. And we have an opportunity to, lots of room for future work here. Right now, just to kind of block out a placeholder, I'm just going to pull in some text context. But this is where the GraphRag techniques that I was looking at more in depth a year ago, this is where we're going to plug those in. And it's all of these things. I haven't mentioned this tenant, but I've kind of mentioned it implicitly. But everything that an agent can do, a human can do in the system, and vice versa. So this would be an opportunity for the human to provide hints about the context, or to approve the context that was suggested by Semiont, or any mix thereof. And we could batch these. There's a lot of interesting ways to piece these together and compose these. But right now, the simple version is we're just going to fetch some textual context, and with that, click generate. It's going to go pulse for a while, and in a few seconds, so we've got the pulsing right here, and there's a little bit of pulsing next to the original reference. And then I'm going to change my click action to follow. Follow, and now Marin Headlands. We're going to see this, and boom, we've got this this document that was kind of created from thin air, but really it's the model that's doing most of the heavy lifting, but also a little bit about the context. So I suppose it's probably going to mention something about all the great hiking that you can do in the Marin Headlands.
Great. So basically, so generate a resource in this case means create a node in the graph that you link to from the documents. And I want to actually just dwell a little bit on. So now I got it. So basically, you solve the problem, which is the hardest problem in GraphRag, the cold start problem. You don't have a graph. You have a bunch of documents. You solve it in a really new way by saying, I keep all of my documents and I build the scaffolding through annotations, and then I use that to refer, I preserve. Because what happens in the kind of traditional GraphRag examples of 2025 is that you do a rag, you chunk it, and then you decorate the chunks, but you lose. You can keep a summary of the document, but the problem is similar to rag. Like, how do I chunk it? Are they big chunks and the small chunks.
Right.
It becomes a voodoo art because you don't really know. And so there is an attempt to throw it into an AI meat grinder and do the chunking and the linking, and it never comes out as you want. So you are saying, okay, keep the originals because they are my golden truth, right? And then do these attempts, and you can actually oversee exactly what's happening, how the nodes have been extracted and linked. You preserve the original content, and you have control, right? So I think this is actually, so it works for any domain where the ground truth is represented by a bunch of documents such as email or legal, right? It may not necessarily map onto supply chain or some other graph representation where nodes are coming out of not documents but digital twins, for instance. But majority of cases right now, I guess, is where people have documents. And like the question of how do you put a bunch of documents into a graph? This is an innovative way to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, still some important pieces to build out, but I think identifying those four key features, which are detection. As we were talking about cameras before we started this conversation, and thinking like autofocus, the eye detection, face detection, all of that stuff. Detection is everywhere. In the last, of course it is, but it's funny how almost it's not present in our AI architecture as much as I would have thought. In 2026, I almost think that there's room for like a new MVC pattern, and so maybe this is like a proposal for kind of an AI equivalent of MVC, and so it's it's detection, resolution, retrieval, and generation. Those are the four you need, and together you can build something like this.
Right. Very good. So kind of for folks who want to kick the tires, I know that you started popularizing it slowly and organically. So you presented it at the AI conference in San Francisco in September. You did some webinars with the AI Alliance. So it's the cat is out of the bag. And you have actually a GitHub code space even. So you basically laid the groundwork for folks to try it. So is this something that people can go ahead and try? And let's say I have a bunch of emails I want to export and play with this. Like, is this something which people can already do?
Yes. Thanks for that prompt. So there are a couple of code space links here. The top one is in the Semiont repo itself. The other one is built from a couple of container images, as well as I recently, just in December, decomposed Semiont into, I think, 11 different NPM packages. Now, I don't know TypeScript, but I think the choice to do this in TypeScript, something that's close to the browser, I think that's going to work out well. A lot of the AI stuff I had done before was in Python for good reasons. I think we can make Python equivalents of this stuff as we go along. What's most important, I think, is the interfaces here. And so I've got these 11 NPM packages. That's for people that want to say build if you saw the interface and you want to use that interface as a knowledge base, and you could plug in MCP to that knowledge base. I've got some earlier work on that available. That would be one way of bringing Semiont into an organization or into a project. But I think there are other deeper integrations that might want to integrate these kinds of capabilities into, say, a custom web app. So I've made all of the React UI available as an NPM package. I've got I've been factoring out the back end out of HTTP. So if you want to run that in a different environment, all of that, the kind of the smarts, that's the make meaning package. And then there's an API client. So that's actually how I uploaded almost all of the documents I was just showing earlier. Almost all of those were uploaded via the API client, also written in TypeScript and published to public NPM repository. So there's a few ways to get started. I've got discussions enabled on both of these repos, and I
Mhm.
glossed over this, but there's a separate Semiont agents repository that I just started. I had started building up examples inside of Semiont itself, but I thought it's actually kind of a different perspective. I want something that's just from a potential user's perspective, like an integrator's perspective. So that's what this repository is meant to be. But yeah, would love it. I have seen people run this successfully. But yeah, would love to start getting more feedback and feature requests and pull requests ultimately.
Obviously, this is the decade of agents. So how do you envision
Yeah.
Semiont agent? What does the current agent do, and where do you see that capability evolving?
Yeah. So there's a few domains represented in this repository. I don't know that I'd call them agentic just yet, but the main activities here are loading a bunch of data resources
Mhm.
and then annotating them. So I've got several examples, a couple from legal, well, 3 from legal. One is like the email that I showed earlier, and a couple case law examples. There's the family research one. There's that hiking note one. This is going to expand. I'd love to have a couple of dozen of these things. But I think, yes, we can make these capabilities, and I've done some work on this already, making all of this available over MCP. I think there's some integrations that make a lot of sense to work that way. I've also started IBM through its acquisition of DataStax has this the Langflow project's a really nice way to build workflows. I'm actively looking at how I could represent a Semiont knowledge base to a Langflow flow. And I also think there's just some like plain old integrations that need to be written. And they don't necessarily need to be MCP based, but these would be things like your Office suites, Microsoft or Google browsers. I think if you could do that kind of annotating in a browser native way, I think that would be potentially very powerful. I think ultimately, part of the reason why this is open is that, this is one of those things that there's these network effects. The more that people are doing things in a similar way, the more powerful this all is. So I think that's true for data providers, and there'll be competing projects for Semiont as we go forward, but also just in the software ecosystem too. If one of the taglines I've been playing with a little bit is like your knowledge everywhere you go, or something like that. That you shouldn't have to leave your knowledge behind just because you want to use a different application. Bring it all with you. Bring the context of your contacts and the legal matter you're working on, or your kid's soccer schedule, all of that stuff. Just make it available in a way that can be kind of intelligently used for, as context effectively. Or
I love it.
Yeah.
And so from what I understand, the annotations can become actually a way to do context interchange between agents, right? Because they basically can represent anything they do now in an annotation. So for now, multiple agents basically cobbling together context every time they hand off something to each other, right? Because currently they operate on a bunch of databases or like email files, like all the context is basically scattered together, represented as some kind of AI memory in an agent, right? So I think we have multiple levels because multiple pieces of information are held together as context. And if one agent gives it to the other, right, some kind of work, the other agent will have to, recreate some of this. It's not ready. So in your solution, the context is basically, standardized in the sense that it's transferred as this annotation that you can agree, like all my annotations stored in MongoDB, right, or whatever, and like where to find all of them, right? So now instead of piecing together fragmented context, you can actually have much richer, consolidated context, right, given by one agent to there. I've been recently thinking of this, and so you offer, so that's an agentic technology, right? Because you let agents interoperate through these annotations, right? And so you recreate context. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I haven't really built out that example yet, but just as a mechanism for storing and making available memories, just generally, I think maybe they're ephemeral, but I think still having a standard way of doing this is extremely important.
They have to persist at least until you do the work, right? Because and if the work is never done, then you need to checkpoint it. So I think like this comes for free by design, because you define what it is. It's just the nature, and you persisted. And what I like about it is human reviewable, right? Like this is
absolutely
if the domain of documents. We're not yet in a place where lawyers will never go away, because human courts are made of humans. So the results need to be reviewable, right? And you start out this way. So this is great.
Yes. Yep.
So I think this is supposed to be like the first introductory overview. I think we got a pretty good idea. Is there anything else you want to add to kind of send folks to play with this? And obviously we'll have follow-ups as we go along, and you'll give a talk about it at Knowledge AI conference in April. Like what are you gonna do between now and April? Like what features do you envision to be built, and where your focus is for the next few months?
Yeah, I do have some of that publicly available here in the Semiont planning project. There's a pretty beefy backlog, but I will say that's probably even only 10% of it. So at a really high level, a lot of what's represented in the plan right now is just building out those 4 AI features across different modalities. There's a bunch of work there. There's also a bunch of work to make this production grade. I've been focusing mostly on the interfaces. It's intentional to start with the user interface, and then keep an eye on the quality. I haven't had any problems with quality. With that said, I'm not too cost sensitive right now because I'm doing this at a very small scale. But the UI is starting to get baked. So now I'm kind of moving, bring these two things together. We're getting more into the need for DevOps and production, concrete cloud implementations of these things. I think all the interfaces that have been built out are pretty compatible with common cloud technologies, but that has to get built out. So if there are folks that are interested in doing that, that's super interesting. And then use cases too. There's a lot of work too that I won't mention, but between those two things that I mentioned, and then just building out more use cases. If there is, people getting people to share the data that's going to work well with this. I mean, that's often quite hard to do, but sometimes there's synthetic versions that do just as well at explaining why this is working for them. I would love to gather that stuff. In fact, I've just started a new repository called Structured Knowledge, where I'm going to take everything that's currently in the Semiont agents, that's just the synthetic data and so forth, and make a repository that's completely independent of technology. So maybe over time that will function as a bit of just a kind of a use case repository, and we can publish benchmarks and that kind of thing. Yeah, there's a lot to be done, but I think. I wanted to get to the point where the demo can at least elicit a lot of this kind of feedback in these discussions. So this has been working well to date. But 2026, we want to make it real, and I'd love to start hearing reports of people running this for all kinds of enterprise use cases and otherwise that matter to them.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's a good point to wrap it up, and the call to action is check this out. As Adam said. See if your domain provides a good use case, try it, and if it serves the purpose and you need to run it at production scale, take some of the backlog elements and harden this, right? And so since you're an engineering leader, you already have this whole work structured for folks to take and run with it. So thank you so much. This is great. I think now I got pretty good handle on what it is, and I think that now the thinking begins how we build applications with it. But it's a great beginning, and we're gonna follow your progress.
Yeah, thanks, Alexei. Looking forward to staying in touch, and thanks for the opportunity today.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.